I'd rather live with Mom than you.
It was just after midnight on a Friday night. My husband was playing an online game in the living room while I was doing some work I had brought home at the dining table when he casually suggested we should live separately. I was surprised and asked him why. We hadn't been getting along well lately, but I still had the right to hear his side of the story. My name is Megan. It was midnight, the moment I turned 35, when my husband, who knew I was going through infertility treatments, dropped a bomb. It was such a surprise that I went blank. Without taking his eyes off his game, he said, "You just turned 35, didn't you? Even if you got pregnant now, it would be a high-risk pregnancy, so I'm giving up on having kids with you. That's why I want to live separately and live with my mom." What? I don't understand. I couldn't understand how giving up on having kids had something to do with living separately with me and going to live with my mother-in-law. We got married 2 years ago. I wanted to enjoy our new married life for a while, but my husband was eager to have a child. Being the youngest of 3 brothers, each of whom had 3 kids, my husband was constantly told by his older brothers, "It's best to have kids while you're still young and energetic." So we decided to give it a try and began trying for a baby, but a year passed and we were not blessed with a child. One day my husband said, "You should get checked out." For what? "Why, we can't have a kid. There must be something wrong with you," he yelled. Although his presumption made me upset, I decided to get checked out at the gynecologist's office just in case. The results showed that I indeed had a problem that made it difficult for me to get pregnant. I had no symptoms and the results were a huge shock. The gynecologist said, "It's difficult to conceive, but natural pregnancy is still possible." However, I felt heavy-hearted to tell my husband about it. That evening, while we were having dinner, I calmly told my husband about the results. He seemed triumphant as he said, "I knew it was you." "But they said I could still get pregnant," I muttered. He glared at me and said, "It has been impossible and it will stay the same." He made his own conclusion again and I was filled with anger. "You could have a problem too, you know." That provoked him to raise his voice. "Megan, it's clear what's going on here. How dare you shift the blame onto me?" With a loud bang, my husband slammed his fists on the table in anger. I shrugged my shoulders with surprise. "You're nothing but a failure. Can't even bear a child." With that parting shot, he headed for the bedroom. Left alone, I started crying, cleaning the dishes through my tears. My husband was just shocked and lashing out. If we could just have a child, we could be a happy couple again. I told myself this and decided to double my efforts in trying to conceive and win my husband's heart back. I started attending the gynecologist regularly. As my knowledge about fertility grew, so did my anxiety. Even though I tried especially hard on my most fertile days, it was always a swing and a miss, and I found myself becoming stubborn about it. One morning, I said to my husband, "Let's try again tonight, okay?" To my surprise, he looked at me disapprovingly and said, "Isn't it a little embarrassing talking about tonight first thing in the morning?" I flushed with embarrassment. Thinking about it, I would find it strange too, but we're a couple, it should be natural. Hiding my complex emotions, I tried to gently persuade him. "You want a child too, don't you?" But my husband retorted, "I don't really want a child. It costs a lot of money. My brothers told me that a real man has a wife and kids, so I thought I'd try. But it's not happening because of you. I have a respectable excuse now, so I don't care anymore." From that point on, whenever I approached my husband, he would reject me with excuses like, "I'm busy," or "I'm tired." I was just as busy and tired from work. Being rejected time and again shattered my pride as a woman. Lately, my husband has been addicted to online gaming, staying up late into the night. Before I knew it, not just our intimate life, but our daily conversations had become almost non-existent. My husband seemed to have lost interest not just in having a child, but in me too. But I didn't stop going to the gynecologist. What surprised me during infertility treatments was the sheer number of couples attending. The clinic I went to specialized in infertility treatments, It was always crowded, and it was normal to wait 2 to 3 hours even with an appointment. Seeing so many other couples struggling with the same issue helped me a lot. Occasionally, I would see a couple leave the consultation room, the woman touching her still flat belly tenderly, her husband walking close by her side. Perhaps they had just found out they were pregnant. I wish it was me. I want a child too. I want to win back my husband's love and be happy. I had held a faint hope for my child, but now I was told it would be difficult to pursue any further treatment without my husband getting tested, and I found myself at a standstill. It might be impossible after all. The way home from the gynecology clinic always filled me with a painful longing, making me want to cry. Getting out to the main road, I looked up and was taken aback by the sight of an old lady in garish attire. The surprise made my tears stop. She was probably in her 70s. Her thick makeup and brightly colored dress were jarringly loud. I didn't know anyone like this, but strangely, she looked familiar. Could it be my mother-in-law? Even though we lived in the same city, I rarely saw her, and she looked nothing like the image I remembered, but I was certain. There was a distinctive mole on her cheek. But my mother-in-law was supposed to be a simple, ordinarily dressed old lady. Taken aback by her drastic makeover, I blended into the crowd. In truth, my mother-in-law is quite the character. She's lenient on herself, yet overly strict with others, casually hurling insults that would leave most people speechless. Moreover, she dotes on my husband, her youngest child, displaying blatant favoritism and treating the rest of her children as if they're good for nothing but money. My brother-in-law also despises her for this. When my father-in-law passed away from cancer last year, there was talk of her moving in with one of her children, but both the eldest and the second son and their families adamantly refused. I thought it would fall to us, but she declared she would live alone as long as she was healthy. Whether out of resentment for being turned down or just her inherent character, when my father-in-law passed away, she caused a huge scene, shouting, "Ungrateful brats, stealing money from the elderly," and monopolized his inheritance without dividing it. No matter how many times my husband or brother-in-law suggested dividing the inheritance according to the law, she would not relent and no one could defeat her. Even I've been told by her, "I have no intention of getting along with you, so don't come to my house." But compared to the fiery battles between her and my brother-in-law and their wives, I was in a relatively peaceful position. My mother-in-law disappeared into a shop without noticing me. I couldn't believe she was the same woman I knew, and I found myself staring at the signboard of the building she entered. That night, I didn't know whether or not I should tell my husband about his mother, but decided not to. After all, she's an adult, and with my father-in-law gone, she's single. It's not my place to criticize her personal hobbies. I've seen her a few times since then, but I've always pretended not to. Then, months passed, and as the calendar turned to my birthday, my husband proposed that we live separately. I decided to ask my husband, "Did you find someone you like?" Perhaps my mother-in-law is an excuse, and he might be planning to remarry someone. But he spends his days playing video games at home, so I don't think he's seeing anyone, I ponder in my mind. I find myself oddly calm and almost want to laugh. My husband, on his part, responds seriously. "Well, there's a girl in my gaming group who I kinda like, but it's just the internet after all. Could be a guy pretending to be a woman." Which makes it all more ridiculous. He is sane enough to judge, so why did he suddenly suggest a separation? I just don't get it. My husband continues, "I just want to live with my mom more than with you." He repeats, "Why would he want to live with his mother and not with me? Do you hate me? Has our love disappeared?" I search for an answer that would satisfy me and ask my husband the next question. As soon as the words leave my mouth, my heart throbs in pain. He doesn't need me, the woman who can't bear a child due to infertility. Holding back the tears, I wait for my husband's reply. "No, not really." "Huh?" My husband defies my anticipation in a straightforward manner. "Didn't I tell you before? I don't care about having children anymore. We need another way to make money." Money? I parrot his unexpected words. He nods calmly and says with a serious face, "It's my mom's inheritance." I can't see the connection in the story at all, and I'm confused. "My brothers are greedy. They'll try to take more of mom's inheritance than me, using the excuse that they have more children. I won't let that happen." Who's the greedy one here? I was dumbfounded, but I kept my mouth shut. "But your mom is very healthy. Isn't it too early to talk about your inheritance?" "That's why. My mom hates you, but she adores me. If I start living with her from now, I think it will be advantageous in receiving the inheritance. My mom must have a lot of my dad's inheritance that she took all for herself, so I don't have to work hard and can live a comfortable life. We don't have children. We need money because there's no one to take care of us after getting old." My husband explained as if making a mockery, but I understood the meaning and was taken aback. The reason my husband wanted a child was... So you needed a child to take care of you after getting old? And since that's not possible, you want a larger share of your mom's inheritance? With hopes my assumptions would prove wrong, I confronted my husband. However, his response was again completely opposite to what I had wished for. "Of course," he exclaimed. "Kids are there to take care of their parents. If I live with mom now, I might be able to take all of the inheritance." I couldn't help but feel the strong blood connection between Tom and his mother, as if it explained everything. He showed no intention to share anything equally. While I was left speechless, Tom continued his monologue. "When mom's gone, I'll come back to live with you. You can't bear children, but you can manage the house chores just fine. You serve a purpose as a housekeeper, and you bring home a decent paycheck as a full-time worker." "Alright, let's get a divorce." My true feelings burst out, cutting him off. Who would accept such treatment, agree to live separately, and then move back together? He's making a fool out of me. I knew that Tom, being the youngest of three, had a tendency to be spoiled, but this selfish plan of his was beyond reprehensible and unacceptable. I realized I could never find happiness staying with him any longer. That was the moment all my love for Tom completely vanished. "Let's hire a lawyer to properly divide our assets and part ways." "Huh? Divorce? I didn't say anything about divorce. We can just live separately, and hiring a lawyer sounds overly dramatic." Though Tom seemed startled at first, my explanation seemed to sway him. "No, you'd feel better as a single too. I won't be satisfied unless we legally divide everything equally. If we get a third party involved to distribute the assets, there'll be no further issues, right?" With a smug grin, Tom agreed. "Well, you have a point. Fine. If I get a good chunk of mom's inheritance, my life after the retirement is secure and I can even remarry someone else. Just don't regret it." Likewise, don't count your chickens before they're hatched, and make sure you don't regret it. The next day, I got a recommendation for a lawyer from a friend who had gone through a divorce and went straight to consult them. I also contacted our landlord to inform them that only Tom would be moving out. I arranged for the movers too. While I was making calls, I could hear Tom on the phone with his mom telling her how he wanted to live together and be a dutiful son. I was secretly shocked he had proposed separation to me without first getting his mother's approval. According to Tom, his mother was overjoyed at the prospect of living with him. She seemed to have some requests or something to ask of him. Just like that, preparations for the divorce proceeded astonishingly quickly. Initially, the plan was to split the assets 50-50, but the lawyer I hired was incredibly competent. He methodically cornered Tom into agreeing to also add alimony, allowing me to take 70% of the assets. If we're separating due to Tom's selfish reasons, I have no qualms about taking it without hesitation. 3 days after our divorce was finalized and my husband returned to his parents' home, I was relaxing in my apartment when my phone rang. It was my ex-husband, Tom. The moment I picked up, he pleaded, "Help me, marry me again." He sobbed. "There was no inheritance at all. My mom has been blowing all her money on male strippers. She's penniless now. What's worse, she's drowning in senior citizen loans and has mortgaged her house." "Oh, really? That's tough. Your mother is addicted to those strip clubs, isn't she?" I chuckled. I'd seen my former mother-in-law disappearing into those strip clubs. The prices on their billboards were shockingly high. I've seen her go in several times, but there's no doubt she spent a fortune there. Ever since Tom got hooked on online games and stopped showing up at his parents' house, his mother got sucked into this club scene. She spent all of her late husband's inheritance and her retirement savings, and now she's taken out so many loans she can't make ends meet. Why didn't you tell me if you knew? I told him I don't intend to meddle in people's hobbies. I never stopped you from playing video games, did I? Tom was at a loss for words and changed the topic. She asked me to take out loans in my name, but that's impossible. Give me the money from the divorce settlement. If we remarry, it'll be our money. No. Why not? You love me, don't you? Your husband is in trouble. I did love you when we were married, but when you suggested we separate, all my feelings for you disappeared. It's obvious you're only after my money now. Why would I get back together with you? That's not fair. Mom's demanding my entire paycheck. She says it's only natural for a child to support their parents. She was always kind to me. Tom whimpered pitifully, but his belief that he should always be in the center of attention and that everyone else should cater to him was the same as his mother's. They really are 2 peas in a pod. They brought this on themselves, and I don't owe them any help. We're divorced now, Tom. We're strangers. Please handle your family's problems on your own, I said, smiling brightly. I ended the call and blocked his number. Then I called each of my former brother-in-laws. It had only been 3 days since the divorce, and I'd planned to let them know when things calmed down, but it seemed better to tell them sooner rather than later. I relayed everything Tom had told me about his mother and the circumstances surrounding our divorce. My former brother-in-laws sympathized with me and promised to give Tom a piece of their mind. Later, I heard from one of them that Tom's brothers had stormed his parents' house, causing a huge commotion. I heard it briefly from my former brother-in-law. After Tom's call, I changed the locks on my door just in case, but I decided to move after all. It's better to completely cut ties. While I was looking at various real estate listings, I found out that his parents' house was for sale. I could ask my former brother-in-laws what happened to Tom and his mother, but I decided not to concern myself with it. I'll look forward and sever ties with the past. I'm thinking of moving to a pet-friendly apartment and enjoying a leisurely, free life, perhaps with a cute cat.
My dad and mom will be staying with us for 2 weeks starting this weekend, my husband casually declared after returning from work. Without even bothering to ask me, he would unilaterally decide when his parents would visit, and I had reached my limit with his arrogance. Wait a minute, again? They were just here last month, weren't they? What's your problem? Are you treating my parents as if they're intruders? That's not what I meant. You're my wife, and all you need to do is make them feel welcome. My husband treats me like a housemaid. It seems like he didn't care about how I felt. I can't bear this kind of life anymore. Just because they're my in-laws, it doesn't mean that I should tolerate everything. I'm definitely going to escape from this situation. My name is Judy. I'm 30 years old. 3 years ago, I married my coworker and resigned from my job when we got married. I want you to be a full-time housewife and support family, my husband asked me, so I became a homemaker. 2 years after we got married, I became pregnant. Currently, I'm living busy days, raising our 1-year-old daughter, Alice. My husband's name is Kyle, who is also 30 years old. Recently, he seems to be in line for a promotion at his company. Due to this, he's been working a lot of overtime and weekend shifts, so we seldom have time as a family. Normally, he'd contact me if he's going to be late, but on this day, he hadn't come home even when it was 8 p.m. I became worried and texted him, but there was no response. After waiting anxiously, he finally came home just after midnight. You're still up. Why didn't you respond even once? I messaged you so many times. I couldn't help it, right? I was doing overtime. Overtime? No matter how busy you are, couldn't you at least send a single text saying, I'm doing overtime and will be late? I was worried because there was no response from you at all. Judy, you're being overly dramatic. Stop making such a fuss just because I got home a little late. What's with that tone? I was worried about you. It seemed my worries are not reaching him at all. Kyle just responded with the flat, yeah, sorry about that, and headed to the bathroom. He wasn't always like this. The changes in Kyle began after our daughter was born a year ago. That being said, I believe Kyle was genuinely happy about Alice's birth. Although he wasn't present during the delivery, he came to the hospital right after she was born. Both sets of parents were delighted, and I still remember how truly happy we were. The following month after Alice's birth, the in-laws came to stay with us, and they stayed for 2 whole weeks. I was exhausted, mentally and physically, from my single-handed newborn baby care, but Kyle decided to invite the in-laws without consulting me. Of course, I firmly protested, but Kyle persisted. My folks just want to see their grandchild. He didn't care about my opinions. Whenever I showed any signs of displeasure, he would respond with even more irritation. And he would always spit out the same line. "Are you treating my parents like they're in your way?" he said. That was the trigger. And from that point on, the in-laws began to stay at our house for 2 weeks, almost every month. While they played with Alice, they did not lift a finger to help with household chores. I was the only one who had to take care of their laundry, meals, and everything, on top of looking after Alice. Kyle was often coming home late due to overtime and away working on weekends, so dealing with his parents fell entirely onto me. The additional burden was unbearable, as I was already overwhelmed with taking care of Alice. Nevertheless, that day, Kyle casually announced, "Oh, by the way, my folks are coming to stay again this weekend." Wait a minute, again? They were just here last month. What, are you treating my parents like they're in the way? That's not what Anyway, you're my wife, and you should host them nicely. Kyle never agreed with my opinions, and my frustrations kept piling up day by day. But thinking of my little daughter, I couldn't just leave him. At that time, all I could do was silently accept what he said. A few days later, as usual, my husband left for work, and the doorbell rang just after 10 a.m. Here they are again. Considering Kyle is at work, it would be nicer if they could at least come late in the afternoon or even in the evening. Holding these grievances within, I opened the front door. Sure enough, there stood my in-laws. Somehow I managed to force a smile. "Good morning, Father, Mother." "Hey there, Judy. Here we are again." "Where's little Alice? Let me hold her right away." Alice is in her room, but she just fell asleep. "What? She's sleeping? Then I'll hold her." "Wait a minute, dear. I'm the one who should hold her first." As they engaged in this banter, they barged into the house. They lifted Alice, sleeping peacefully in her crib, and started a tug-of-war over her. I tried to stop them. "She's sleeping!" But they paid no heed. Crying out over who gets to hold Alice, they ended up waking her up with the noise. And then, of course, Alice started crying. As soon as Alice started crying, the in-laws thrusted her back at me. "Oh, she's crying again. This kid cries all the time, doesn't she?" "Yeah, really? Kyle didn't cry this much. Judy, are you sure you're giving her enough love?" "Of course I am." I couldn't stand their comments any longer, so I chimed in. "She usually sleeps just fine. She's crying now because the two of you were shouting over her." "What? Are you trying to say it's our fault?" "Oh, goodness, Judy, that's a harsh thing to say. We're here trying to dote on our granddaughter, and instead of thanking us, you complain." "I didn't mean to complain. It's just that..." "Now I've got a bad taste in my mouth. I'm feeling a bit peckish, too. Can you make us something?" "Well, I'm going to take a break. Judy, can you brew us some tea? Oh, and don't forget the cookies." Despite Alice crying at the top of her lungs, they behaved just like that. If they're hungry, they could eat outside. If they want tea, they could brew it themselves. Even though I thought that in my heart, I couldn't say it out loud. I stood in the kitchen holding my sobbing daughter and catered to my in-laws' demands. For the next 2 weeks, I was busy without a break. My in-laws, and of course, my husband, didn't help with the housework at all. Eventually, I couldn't bear it anymore, and the night my in-laws left, I complained to my husband. "Hey, about your parents, can't they reduce the frequency of their visits a bit?" "What are you talking about? You're saying you don't like my parents coming?" My husband immediately retorted, and I was taken aback. "It's not that I dislike it, I just think they visit too often. Plus, Staying for 2 weeks, that's way too long. It's just 2 weeks, isn't it? Besides, they don't come every month. Don't complain too much. My husband sighed deeply and didn't even try to make eye contact with me. Nothing was going to be changed for the better. I thought, and I pleaded with him again. Listen to me. Seriously. I'm busy taking care of Alice, and it's tough to also take care of your parents on top of it. Kyle, you don't even help me at all, and I've got too much on my shoulders. Huh? Don't talk like my parents are a burden. They're taking care of Alice, and I can't believe you can say such a thing. Taking care? As soon as Alice cries, they push her on to me. You're always like that, Kyle. Just doting on her when you're in a good mood, and you're not really caring for her. Give me a break. Do you realize who you and Alice are living off of? What? Why do you have to bring it up? I became a housewife because you wanted me to, Kyle. Shut up. Isn't it the fact that you're living off my money? Stop complaining and properly treat my parents. His loud shouting voice woke up Alice. Immediately, Alice started to cry, and he left the room with an annoyed look on his face. Why? How can he make such a face to his own daughter? It's his fault that Alice woke up in the first place, because he was shouting. Can't he help with housework and childcare just a little? I had nowhere to direct my anger and frustration, and tears welled up in my eyes. Hidden by the sound of my daughter's cries, I wept quietly. Even after that, my relationship with my husband didn't improve, and the days passed by. It had been a while. Around that time, I received a phone call from my mother who lives far away. Hello, Judy. Do you have any plans this weekend? No plans in particular. What's up? Well, actually, there's a funeral of a friend nearby. I haven't seen Alice for so long. I was thinking I'd like to visit. Really? I'd be so happy. Please come visit. Oh, I'm glad. If it's not too much trouble, could I possibly stay for one night? Of course. I'll let Kyle know. The unexpected news of my mother's visit filled me with joy. What should we eat? What should we talk about? I was filled with anticipation. But when I told my husband about my mother's visit when he got home, he returned an unexpected answer. Huh? What are you talking about? That's out of the question. Wait a minute. Why is it out of the question? This weekend, my mom and dad are coming over. We don't have room to accommodate your mother. I don't want to be bothered either. Huh? Your parents are coming again? Stop saying again. We should be grateful they're even coming. Huh? Grateful? What is he talking about? I don't see how this is something to be grateful for when it only adds to my burden. Normally, I would back down to avoid a fight, but I couldn't give in this time. I made up my mind and once again confronted him. Isn't it strange? Why is it fine for your parents but not for my mother? Huh? Well, of course the husband's parents come first. What? That's not fair. And the ratio is off. Your parents are here nearly every month, but my mother can't even come once a year? Since Alice was born, my mother hasn't seen her. Well, send her some photos or something. She doesn't need to come all the way. She's only coming because she has a funeral to attend. It's only for one night. Why do you always prioritize your parents so much? You're the worst. The words I blurted out, "You're the worst," seemed to have struck a nerve. He furrowed his brows and glared at me. You'd better watch out your attitude. I just meant just for one day we could have my mother. Enough. I'm the one paying for the rent, the groceries, all the living expenses. In other words, I get to decide who gets to come to this house. Shut up and do as I say, you parasite. At that moment, all the frustrations I had been suppressing exploded. All I asked was to host my mother for just one day. And yet, why do I have to be berated like this? And a parasite? Really? How could he say such a thing? Who does he think does all the housework while he's out making money? Enough is enough. I'll show him. It was at that moment that I decided to divorce my husband. To set an appropriate stage for it, just a little more patience was needed. I ended up explaining the situation to my mother and told her we couldn't host her. The weekend arrived and the in-laws came. My husband, unusually, had no work that day. Thanks for hosting us again, Judy. Is Alice awake yet? Yes, she's awake. Oh, what perfect timing. Let me hold her. Like always, the in-laws stormed into our house without any hesitation. My husband just sat there, grinning like a fool. While I was preparing some tea, my mother-in-law and husband approached me grinning. "Judy, we always feel bad, but since we help look after Alice like this, you must be grateful, right?" "Absolutely. It's all thanks to Mom and Dad. Oh, by the way, Judy, this time they're staying for 3 weeks." "That's fine. This will be the last time anyway." Upon hearing my reply, my husband and his parents let out a synchronized, "Huh?" After a moment of shock, my husband frantically asked, "Hey, Judy, what the hell are you saying? What do you mean by the last time?" "I mean exactly what I said. I can't deal with you all anymore." "What? Don't joke with me. If you keep talking like that, I'll divorce you." "Fine." "What? Here you go." I handed him the divorce papers I had filled out in advance. The color drained from Kyle's face as I thrust the papers at him. "What the hell is this? A joke, right?" "Do you think I'd joke about this? I'm serious. I've told my mom, and I've decided to leave this house and go back to my parents' home." "What? I won't let you do that. We are not getting a divorce." Even his parents joined in as I stood there in silence. "What Kyle says is right. You've been leeching off of him, and now you're acting all high and mighty. You're living off Kyle, and yet you're taking this attitude even with us." The three of them started hurling insults at me one after another, but I no longer needed to endure it. They are no longer my family or anything else to me. Taking a deep breath, I let them have it. "Enough with you and your goddamn bullshit. You think just because I'm quiet, you can say whatever you want? Do you have any idea how much I've had to put up with?" It was the first time I've ever talked back like this in front of them, so all three of them were taken aback. Eventually, Kyle started opening and closing his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but I didn't let him and continued. "I wouldn't wish to be part of a family like yours anymore. Taking care of Alice? You're just intruding for your own satisfaction. Just holding her when she's in a good mood doesn't mean you're looking after her." "Well, wait, Judy, let's calm down a bit." "Shut up. Since Alice was born, how many times have you changed her diaper, fed her a bottle, bathed her? You're just messing around with her when she's in a good mood. You let your parents stay over all the time, but not my mom? That's bullshit. Why should only your parents be treated so well? I've had enough of babysitting you three." My outburst left the three of them standing there in shock. Having vented all my grievances, I grabbed my bare essentials, picked up Alice, and left the house. I then headed straight for my parents' house. I had already told my parents about the situation, so they warmly welcomed me. I ignored all the calls and emails from Kyle. If he refuses to agree to the divorce, I'm considering going for mediation. The divorce will most likely proceed on the grounds of his fault, because I discovered his affair. The woman he was cheating with was a colleague from the company where I used to work. One of my ex-colleagues who had worked at the same place as him told me about the affair and even provided photos as evidence. All his claims of working late or on weekends were lies. No wonder he gradually became distant after Alice was born. Based on the evidence of the affair, I hired a lawyer, and eventually the divorce was finalized. I was able to collect the agreed-on alimony from Kyle. Of course, I reported the affair to our company, and both my ex-husband and his mistress were fired. Their relationship seemed to have quickly fizzled out due to this, and they parted ways. Having lost his job, and with the alimony payment creating a debt, I heard that he's now constantly being hounded by debt collectors. His parents, my former in-laws, who used to rely on him, are apparently now having a harder life than before. I don't have a shred of sympathy for them, since it's all a product of their own actions. As for me, I've been raising my daughter, with the support of my parents at our family home. There are tough times, sure, but thanks to my parents' help, we're managing to lead a peaceful life. My daughter is only a year old. There will come a day when she'll wonder about her father. When that day comes, I'll explain everything to her in words that she can understand. I plan to pour all the love I can into my daughter for as long as I can.